All right, boys, hello and welcome. It is the 8th episode of ScriptChat. We haven't been doing ScriptChat every Sunday. It's been hard for us to find content to share every single Sunday, but I am working on it. We do have a schedule. We don't have anybody special on today, just me, as special as I can be by myself. And so I'm just going to do a presentation of some new material that we have. It's available in the community's GitHub repository. It is the 9th of April, 2023, a little after 1 p.m. my time. It is Easter Sunday, though, so hopefully none of you are watching this live, although if you are, I'll try to be the family that you're probably supposed to be with. But a lot of people like to go to their families for, Easter supper. And I think it's later in Europe. It's probably evenings, 7, 8, 9 o'clock p.m., depending on where you are in Europe. But in America, they like to have like Easter dinner early, like 3 p.m. or so. So, but if you're here, thank you. Appreciate your interest. Maybe you've just eaten a huge amount of Easter turkey or ham and your stomach is full. And you just like to watch ScriptChat so you can fall asleep after Sunday dinner. That's fine too. That is absolutely fine. We don't really have anything terribly important or exciting. I've just finished the RREC map pack and I finally made some modifications. So basically I'm just going to go through that. And I'm going to show that, and then I'm going to show something else that we have too. Actually, I'll show that something else, I think, first, because it's more important than the map pack. So I've been clearing out my folders. I've been trying to organize things a little bit more intelligently, a little bit smarter. And I realized, it would be really helpful. So we have the GitHub repository, right? And we've renamed it Alchemy AoE Community Random Map Scripts. And you can go in here and you can, of course, select your branch, right? And certain creators either make a workshop for themselves, or maybe they, there's a specific tournament, like the Empire State Cup was a project that I started a while ago. King of Ireland tournament, we all know about that. But I've got this Return of the Rising Eagle Cup here. And this is a planned tournament. We don't know when it's going to happen. Seabass, that's Seabass's whole thing, and he's got plans for it and ideas, but he asked me to make the maps, or maybe I asked him if I could make the maps. I don't remember exactly what happened. But there's no plan to have this at any particular time, but when he's ready, when he gets to a position where he's comfortable hosting a tournament based on what's going on in his life. So we've all been there. We've all got different things going on. But when he's ready, these maps will be there, and they're going to be awesome. So he's not made an announcement. There's no plan for a tournament. But other than just he wants to have one when he gets back into things. So this is the branch that we're on here. And I realize, though, that a lot of people are going to be uploading a lot of maps to this, and you could go and you could select the entire library, you could look at the different branches, and you might see a bunch of maps popping up when you go to play your community games or whatever. But you may have no knowledge of what those are capable of. Like, let's say that you want to play Regicide because you want to sort of even the odds or reduce the size of that skill gap. Maybe you got people of varying skill in your lobby, and you know that if it's Regicide, that any 1200 player can go in and make 50 petards and 10 cavalry archers and go and rush the castle of some 2K player and potentially get a king snipe. That's a lot easier than trying to out macro him, right? So I wanted to be able to include an overview somewhere of what each of these maps would be compatible with in terms of settings. So if you know what your settings are going to be, you can look at a very, very basic, doesn't require the game to open, doesn't require anything fancy to open, and you could just see, okay, does this map that I want to play support the settings that I want to play on? So we've got the Return of the Rising Eagle Cup branch selected here. But when we select that, we go in here and we get all of these all these folders pop up with all the different, supporting. They obviously have the script file in them right here, the .rms, but they also have all the other supporting files that were used to make it. Anyway, there's an open document spreadsheet right here that's in basically every single one of these subfolders. I'll try to. So we'll go through and I'll just change to entire library real quick. Leave my changes. Yeah, it's fine because it detects that I have this. I really need to add this to the git ignore somehow. Whenever you open up an ODS file, it puts this sort of open protection on it, which is this number sign after the ODS. Anyway, so we've switched over to the entire library here, and now we'll go and we'll check and we'll see we've got all these other, all these other folders open up. Return of the Rising Eagle Cup has a summary here, and Tech Chariots Workshop has a map summary as well. And then I think I did one for the Empire State Cup too. Some of them are old enough that I haven't really bothered. Like I didn't do anything for the King of Ireland tournament because I don't expect to ever use the maps again. And I don't know if Q Phillip, no, it doesn't look like Q Phillip's done anything with it yet. So anyway, we'll change back now. But you can see that each map pack has that summary in it. So if you've got entire library selected, you'll have access to that inherent to GitHub. So we'll go back to this branch, and what's this? Yeah, we'll bring the changes with us. No. All right, it looks like we have to close it so it doesn't get confused. Sorry about that. So once we close it, it should, whatever, discard the changes. That's fine. Okay, so we're going to go back here to the Return of the Rising Eagle Cup. We're going to open the version that's in this branch. And I'll show you guys what it contains. And I think that this is kind of valuable information, like I said. Obviously, the name of the map. An analog, like there's a standard map that it's kind of close to. So the standard map would be something that everybody would be much more likely to know what it's all about, what it has, what some of the features of it are. So this is useful identifying information, the author of the map. So if you have an idea about it or you have a problem with it, this is the person to go and hunt down and say, hey, this map needs this. Or if you love the map, this is the person that you shower with your praises. Standard start contains town center. Okay, so this is basically, is this a nomad map? That's what this question is. So you have two options, yes or no. Nomad on low resources. So a lot of the maps that I've made, you can actually convert them to nomad maps by selecting low resources in the lobby. Low resources is functionally equivalent to just standard resources. It doesn't actually do anything. It's redundant. So you can cleverly use it in random map scripting for something else. I wish that was my idea, but it wasn't. But what I did do is I did adapt most of these maps to have a nomad start if you select low resources. So this will tell you whether or not that's the case. There's only one map that doesn't. None of the maps support Empire Wars. Most of the maps support Deathmatch. It tells you whether or not they support ludicrous map size. If you could play with the AI. Sometimes you want to avoid playing with the AI on certain maps, but like it technically can do it, like it won't crash. This tells you, whether or not it can support certain team games. So if you wanted to do like a 4v4 on a map, but maybe a scripter, the map was only made for 1v1, then this will tell you, and the person that's picking the community game will be like, okay, well, I need to pick a different one then, so you don't have people's games crash. Or not crash, but like just load in and instantly be defeated because you don't have anything, or have stuff that just doesn't look right. And this is just a question of the outright number of players that an FFA could support. This is the number of potential starting configurations. So, you know, if it has an infinite number of configurations because it's create player lands, or maybe you're using direct placement, you're only placing them in certain locations. And this column here gives folks the chance to write a general description about the map in case, you know, what's over here in just the standard map analog doesn't cover it. So these are map caveats column here. This is stuff that you need to know that if you don't know, you will not be able to play on this map successfully. It is very important knowledge. And then there are columns, finally, there are columns for different rule changes. Okay, so if your map, either these could be rule changes that you do for fun, or they could be rule changes because you genuinely believe that the map needs it. Like maybe your map calls for forage bushes to just be everywhere, but for the sake of improving the buildability of the map to make it so that you can build the buildings that you need to build, maybe those forage bushes only contain 10 food in them or something that are close to the town center. This is where you could note that. Now, you want to be careful though, because technically rule changes are more so about things that you cannot see by clicking on something. You can't inspect it by clicking. So like the example with the forage bushes, technically you could click on a forage bush and see how much food it has in it. But you can't click on, like, let's say a trade cart to know that the trade cart's going to generate half the gold per trip, right? That's something that you should note in the rule changes here. So anyway, that is the description spreadsheet. And now let's go through the maps. You have stash changes. Whatever. Okay. So we'll come over here to RREC. And we'll show the first one, which is Arabia. So this is standard, you know, this was the intention for this was to be the opening map of a set that you play against your opponent. There is an eagle outline here on the mini-map, but it doesn't really appear on the map itself. It's not super visible, especially given all of the terrain blending you have in there. The intention is for this map to kind of look like Greece. To my knowledge, there are not any, you know, major modifications to the resources. I basically just copied the resource data in the spreadsheet for Irish Arabia, and I plugged it in here. So the spacings of the golds and the stones and all of the deer and you know, the rest of the animals are the same as Irish Arabia. So this map works for all team games. For team positions, you got to be careful that you're not using like gray and orange in a 3v3 because they will not spawn properly. There isn't so much elevation in this. I mean, there's a little bit of elevation. It's more similar to runestones in terms of elevation, actually. But yeah, not too much to say about this. You know, most Arabian maps have player assigned woodlines now at this point, but this map is sort of old school. The map does not have player assigned woodlines. These are all neutral woodlines, which is why they're sort of evenly spaced. They're simply instructed to avoid the player starting areas by a certain distance. Now that distance is generally large, and the reason that distance is large is because we don't have player assigned woodlines for this. When the distance is larger, smaller, you know, the same variation will also look smaller because we can't guarantee that a certain player will get a certain number of woodlines. If you make them further away, it'll be harder to see any unfairness. Because there will be less unfairness. It'll be equally unfair generally for both players. I do think it's important that wood lines are kind of close or accessible to the players. These wood lines are pretty far away. So, because if wood lines are too far away, right, it just boils down to whoever gets the best snowball on the other player. You know, it can feel very, very snowbally. So I've tried to put more wood lines in on this map to compensate for the fact that they are so far away. I might have to make them a little bit larger. We'll see. It's going to require testing. But that is my one big concern about this map. It's like the weakness in the map that I see in terms of the map being able to be fair and such and enjoyable for everybody is the wood lines are not very big. So they're not very big and they're far away. So it'll be pretty rough and unforgiving. I mean, maybe you could like get into a space like here, sort of wall to your town center, or make a little palisade gate and build a tower in here and sort of box this in. So it's I don't think it's impossible to defend, but it will be difficult, especially given all of the nerfs that walls have received. Although we could technically probably undo those nerfs if you want to know the truth. So otherwise, there's not really too much to say about it. It's just standard. There's neutral resources out here. I tried to give a little bit more neutral resources scattered across the map so that if you ever are in the position where you want to branch out or you're being pressured at home, you want to branch out to the back of the map or something, the corner of the map, you can do so. There are, I think, 700 some odd positions. Technically, this eagle outline is really what messes with all of it. Hey, BP is here. Welcome. The eagle outline is what makes the player-assigned wood lines impossible, and it also makes the player starting positions kind of impossible. So you have to do direct placement of the players, which means that you need to write a contingency for every possible situation. So you basically need to predetermine all the potential coordinates of players in advance and then tell them to spawn there, given a randomly selected variable from a list. So the relics are reasonably fair, I think. As you go up in larger sizes, it does generate the right amount. I did fix my techniques for that, but my concern is that the relics are less fair for larger sizes. So we'll generate a larger size here, so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. So these relics are actually okay. We tried to keep the relics like in the center of the players, but here they are. Eagle outline. The eagle outline looks really sharp. BP helped me with this eagle. He did a really nice job with Inkscape making the eagle outline. He made a 4K eagle, you guys. So that we could get accuracy like this. It was really quite special. He did a fantastic job on it. And then it was a lot of tricky terrain layering to get this nice thin line around the outside here. It's kind of a miracle, actually. I didn't think we were going to be able to do it. But the eagle just looks gorgeous. So I'm very, very excited to see this in play. It'll be quite excellent. So the next one that we're going to show is Acropoli, the transliteration of Acropolis. I mean, come on, it's Greece. You can't play on Greece without Acropolis here. So we're going to show that. Oops. Remember that the tournament is meant to be played in 1v1. Now these Acropoli are technically, since we're here, I guess we might as well show it. But this is with an FFA. That's the diplomacy settings here, and that's why everybody gets their own mountain. However, if we arranged the teams, then each team would be on its own mountain. So the mountains would be pretty big. It's It's different from Team Acropolis. It's Acropolis. It's not Team Acropolis. So let me adjust the diplomacy here for player 1. Player 2 is allied with players 1 through 4. We're not going to do the standard odd versus even numbers. We're going to mix the teams up a little bit, just so you guys can see. Acropolis has an infinite number of positions for these players. And I think it's a little bit smaller of a script too. I think it generates a little bit quicker. It's, not as fancy as Arabia, but still quite good in my opinion. Oh, I forgot to show on Arabia that the boars have craters underneath them because boars like to dig in the dirt. It's part of being a boar. Let's generate it on the correct size map here. There we go. So the boars have craters under them in Arabia, at least. They don't have them here. And the crater tells you, just generate Arabia real quick and I'll just show you guys. You might not actually be able to see it so well, so I'll probably have to delete the object. So we'll come back to Arabia and generate it. We'll come back and talk about this. We could talk about whether or not to put that on all of them. But, so as an example, here's a boar, right? And you can't really see it right now. So we're going to take this boar and we're going to delete it. Let's say that your opponent lames the boar. Well, look at this. You guys see that crater there? He can't lame the crater. He cannot lame the crater. So, therefore, you see the crater left behind and you know that your opponent stole your boar. And indeed, Smokey has stolen many boars. I don't mean to publicly shame him, but Smokey did lame on this map. We haven't really done anything to try to move the boars to the back. Maybe we should, but it could be tricky. All right, anyway, so back to Acropolis. Back to Acropolis. So you can see that the relics are basically all in this sort of center area, and the wood is terrible up here. Well, I mean, it's pretty bad. You do have some cypress trees growing around the edge here. It gives you a little bit more wood to work with, but honestly, it's really, really not much. They're bush forests. I believe they have the same amount of food as normal. These reeds are terrible. It's kind of a stony Acropolis. It's a little bit more lush up here. And you have fewer resources on top of your Acropolis. Okay, the Acropolis is large. It's basically like Arabia, except you can't wall to the edge of the map, and your good wood lines are out here. So, in my opinion, it'll be more aggressive than Arabia. Now, we want to look at it in a 1v1. These wood lines are bigger than Arabia's wood lines, actually. So, that's at least a benefit. But in the team games, these guys are not starting up like on opposite corners of the map like they would on Team Acropolis. And Team Acropolis, you basically just go FC and you boom. Like there's not very much strategic variety. With this one, I feel like you still do scouts and archers, right? Because blue is not really that far away from orange. And there is a pond in the middle with some shorefish and a relic in the middle of it. So you kind of are rewarded for docking if you dock. Let's look at it on tiny size though, because that's the size that it's intended to be played on competitively at some point. Oops. Did I not select the correct number of players? That is bizarre. What? Number of players 2. I have seen this before. Oh, he's ally for whatever reason. If he's ally, it puts him in the same spot, I think. Oh, we need to enemy both of them. Yeah, there we go. And then we'll keep the seed. It should work properly. There we go. Okay, so your opponent is on an adjacent hill to you, and there's a little bit more, more space, kind of spread out and do what you want to do. Maybe you can get away with going FC, although I think the Acropolis is a little bit, well, the Acropolis is, relatively densely forested, I think, but you definitely don't want to wait and let your opponent get all this military and then, let him deny you from the wood lines here. Of course, we've got the Greek columns. And that is a trademark of all of the maps. Do a couple more generations so you guys can see. But there's nothing special about the player land generation here. Oh, come on. Two teams. That is bizarre. It's never happened in the, it's only ever happened in the scenario editor. I'm actually going to back out the scenario editor and go back in. Yeah, that's never happened when we've tested it in single player or multiplayer. But for whatever reason, sometimes the scenario editor just does that. Okay, let's come back here and do Acropolis again. There we go. This is how it's supposed to look. We saw one of these earlier. Standard bores. The bores are back in this case. But they could just as easily be forward. So, something to think about. 5 relics. Pretty open map. Not a lot of resources. Most of your gold is actually basically just on top here. I don't think there's a gold down here in the valley that's assigned to players. I think it's all kind of neutral gold. Yeah, the stack TCs was pretty interesting. So you guys get the idea. Basically just Acropolis. Still shorefish here. It'd be interesting to see if the players go for the shorefish. I personally would not go for it. I don't think it's ever going to be worth it. Your opponent will just punish you for doing so. Similar to Valley, actually. But maybe somebody has a way of making it work. So let's see what my notes are for that. I don't think I had too many other notes. Keep this up and handy. No, it's just classic Acropolis reskinned with Greek theming. Contains a central pond with few shorefish. All right. Next one is Frurio. It's kind of the opposite of Acropolis. Acropolis might sound all fortified and powerful, but it's really not. It's very aggressive. But Frurio is Greek for fortress, the transliteration, I should say. You got 4 towers. The towers are always forward, and the castle is always in the back. So, I mean, it's just fortress, but it's always regicide. What do you guys need to know about this map? Well, you need to know that the relics are always going to be inside of this this tan line on the minimap. There is another tan line on the minimap that represents a ring of unbuildable rock terrain. You cannot build on this rock terrain, and it prevents you from walling to the edge of the map. So, come over here and select the city wall. You try to wall from this wood line to the edge of the map. Fail. Can't do it. How about here? Fail. Okay, you can wall like that, but you cannot wall immediately behind it. So what that does is that makes this wall right here actually do something, right? Because if your opponent is guaranteed to be able to get over to this wall with a bunch of paladins, He can. There's nothing you can do to wall him out and prevent it. So the forests between those two tan lines are generally thick and plentiful. So this is where people could expand out to build some town centers. The forests in the middle here are kind of scrawny and far apart and scraggly. You can see it more in the larger sizes. There are sometimes bears out here. Again, Greek ruins. There is a ring of trees out here you could chop through to get to some bonus stone if you wanted. But I haven't really seen anybody go for this yet. I haven't really seen any good 1v1s on this, to be honest, or any of the Greek maps. We haven't tested it. So, got some more bears, but otherwise it's basically just Regicide Fortress. The map will be Regicide whether or not you select the option in the lobby. Always remember that. Always remember that. So, Fortress has no sheep, but there are farms, there are 2 boars, and there are berries. So, there is 1 main gold inside, 1 main stone inside, and then there are 2 golds and 1 stone on the outside. So, here's a gold, here's a stone, and then this player's other gold is somewhere. Maybe it's only 1 gold and 1 stone. That's how it looks. Yeah, gold. Gold. Oh no, here's the gold. So this is red's gold. This is actually red's gold. This is red's stone. This gold belongs to blue, and this stone belongs to blue. Oh, this might be a neutral gold. I'm not really sure. Either way, it's sort of halfway between them, so whatever. Unless I'm just not seeing it. Could do another generation. See if I can count them. So 1, 2, and the stone is here. Yeah, so 2 golds should be on the outside. 1, 2, and then the stone is right here. There's a neutral stone here. So I think for that one, both players had a neutral gold that was sort of merging. I don't think it'll be a big deal, but we'll see. Okay. So otherwise, not too much to say about this map. You get 4 wood lines inside of your big walls. Walls are slightly smaller than traditional fortress, but not much. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Yeah, classic fortress reskinned with Greek theming. Contains a ring of unbuildable rock terrain around the edge of the map, but it is unconditionally regicide regardless of whether the option is selected in lobby. Okay. The next map is Krishfugito, I think, is how it's pronounced. So Krishfugito is hideout. It's Greek hideout. It's not as grassy and cute as the other one. It's more dry and arid. I like to think maybe this is a more southern or eastern portion of Greece. So we got the Greek columns acting as decoration, of course. You got a gold and a stone outside of your walls, a gold and a stone inside of your walls. All of the relics are outside of this green line on the mini-map. And otherwise the players are basically just kind of occupying and carving out this section here. The wood is perfectly circular. Well, it's close to perfectly circular as you can get in the middle. And then there are smaller wood lines out here. It's not a huge deal. I don't think it's too easy to wall off, but I guess we'll see. It has an infinite number of starting possibilities because the lands are made with, or the player lands are made with create player lands. They're not made with any kind of direct placement. So otherwise it's basically just hideout. Lots of rocks because it's Greece. I think this one, if you do FFA, I believe it generates a bald spot in the middle of this forest, which is fun. Let's see. Yeah. So if you do decide to chop through in like an 8-player game, then this area in the middle is less dense. So you may actually be able to chop through faster, which I think would be more interesting. I did make that modification to it. I don't know. I don't know if this is actually ever going to see any play or if it will become relevant. And it's certainly not going to affect the 1v1. But I thought it'd be interesting to try out. Just having, little clearings. Maybe the spacing isn't enough for the siege weapons to successfully navigate and path their way through. Maybe they'll just get stuck and people will end up chopping it anyway. We'll have to see. But certainly this is already quite thick, so you're not going to be like chopping through and doing a tower rush or a castle drop. You can see that on the larger sizes, we probably should try to figure out a way of spacing these relics a bit more fairly. Like this side of the map has lots of relics and this side doesn't. So if one team were on this side of the map, like this was one team and this was another team, the relics would be pretty unfair. But that is an artifact of scaling the relics back, and there's basically no way to guarantee the proper number of relics for a 1v1 if we have the spacing large enough between them so that it's fair on a 4v4. So that is one thing that I gotta add some features to my object autoscriber, maybe to sort of provide a manual scaling or a scaling of relics that's a little bit different. Okay. I don't think I had anything else to say about Trisfugado. It's classic hideout reskinned with Greek theming. Not too much more to say about it, honestly. Libadi is the next one. So we will launch this here. This is an analog of ES Prairie. ES Prairie is, of course, one of the old Ensemble Studios maps. Prairie, you start with 2 or 3 wood lines. They're not massive, but they're not super tiny either. And you start with 2 scouts and lots of deer, no boar. So you can't really use the scouts to steal any resources. I think it's intended that you mill your deer, or at least one patch of deer, because you have the berries under your town center in this case. There is additional, I think this is kind of near a coastal area, because on Prairie you actually can have some water in the corners. So we got some Greek cliffs over here to show that off. Rocky areas, rocky outcroppings, if you will. So small Mediterranean style forests, the ruins, everything. But then there's kind of like a greener area in the middle. Although we don't have too many deer in it, just a couple groups of deer, because they have to avoid the player lands by a large amount. So here are the player lands. On this one, of course, you are guaranteed a set number of wood lines, which is nice. We'll hit generate again. You don't know where your opponent is. But since you have 2 scouts, you're more likely to be able to find your opponent, which is good, which is important. Now, if you start with 2 scouts, then that means that you have 5 population. So it means that players will be getting loom immediately for this map. So they get loom immediately, and that means that their villagers are harder to snipe with scouts. So you might look at this and say, well, 2 scouts, that's a bad idea. The scouts could gang up on a villager, and that is indeed true. But remember that everybody is going to have loom starting out with, so it's not going to be as unfair as it may look. It'd be interesting to see what players go with. I feel like this is going to be a very scouts heavy map. Although, given that the wood lines are relatively small, if you can get to archers, you could really mess up your opponent pretty badly. Now, note that the wood lines are larger, I believe, if there are only two of them, which is the case here. And they're still pretty far away from the players. So overall, I'm looking forward to seeing this one played out. Again, it's going to be action-packed. It's an open land map. I mean, it's really just that simple. Similar to Acropolis, similar to Arabia. So I'm not good at these kinds of things, but other people are, and they love them. So we'll see what they come up with for them. Don't think I have too many more notes for this map. Yeah, it's just classic ES Prairie reskinned with Greek theming. It does contain minor elevation. Prairie does not have elevation, but I gave this one elevation just because I think elevation is interesting. I think it adds a lot more to the map. There might be some reason why you're not supposed to have elevation in Prairie. Maybe it the way it interacts with the number of starting scouts you have, but I think it's important. And it is kind of funny that it's called Prairie and it's not really flat. It's uphill from the ocean, but relatively speaking, this area of the map is unimportant, right? So you can do stuff like this. Okay. So the next map is, I'll show this one in 4v4 here. There's nothing special that happens for like teams or anything like that. The prairie area is a little bit bigger in 4v4. You got your one relic always in the middle, and then the other relics around the outside. But you can see it kind of looks like a flower. Sort of cute, I suppose. But there you go. So the area outside is a little bit bigger, but and there's more. Now that you have more space in the middle, you'll have more deer forming in this prairie, and there are small woodlines and such. But yeah, just not a lot of wood, not a lot of resources on this map, except maybe food in this case with all that extra deer. So now let's go and look at Nicaea. Nicaea is a great map. I worked pretty hard on Nicaea. Developed new scripting technology to make Nicaea. The analog for Nicaea is Northern Isles. I wanted to capture a lot of the things that Northern Isles had done successfully. Northern Isles has several big improvements over the base islands game. Number one, the islands are elevated above the water. So that means that units do extra damage to ships, and ships do less damage to units because units, chances are going to be uphill from the ships. We've got all kinds of like little neutral rocky islands scattered across. So all kinds of opportunities for galleys to sort of micro around. It'll hopefully nerf fire ships a bit because fire ships are pretty powerful. These islands are downhill. So if you want to, interesting, but that's called a Kothon. If you want to tower rush somebody, let's just show watchtower. And you do get on one of these islands to build a watchtower. He could build a tower on his own island and have a hill advantage against you. So I tried to do stuff like that to make it less snowbally. Anyway, so either way though, regardless of which of these islands we're talking about, they're still higher than the ocean. So therefore, you're going to have an attack bonus against ships. And I wanted to reproduce that for this map because I think that's a very good change. The other good change that Northern Isles introduces is Northern Isles introduces a ring of unbuildable rock terrain around the edge of your island here. And that's important. Let me just demonstrate here. Palisade wall. So you cannot wall to the edge of the map even if you wanted to. Look at that. So that means that if somebody lands you, you could, you might be able to wall off kind of like this, try to get them from coming in. But let's say they've got stuff here, you cannot wall to the edge of the map here, right? You can't prevent them from moving around this way, so they could just walk around. I mean, with islands, it wasn't that big of a deal anyway, I guess, because chances are they have a transport ship. But this just makes landings even easier, is because now you don't even need to retain control of the ocean in that area to land and to get your units around the walls. So landings are easier that way, and that's a good thing because it evens the odds here. Civilizations that have really good navy or get access to cannon galleons have a pretty big advantage over civilizations that don't on the traditional islands map. That's just how it is. If you're like Aztecs and your opponent builds castles along the edge of his island, you cannot destroy your opponent. There is no way to win. You have to try to land him with a bunch of rams or something and take down the castle, and that's a huge cost because the castles are going to be shooting at your transport ships as they come in, and it's just going to be a mess. So normally you would make cannon galleons, but some civs don't get them. So that's why, some of these meso civs don't have a lot of options. So we've made landing easier here by having that ring of unbuildable rock terrain, so that it'll happen much more aggressively in the early game. The other reason that this map will be aggressive is because everybody starts with a transport ship. Everybody starts with a transport ship, but not a house. So that means, again, 5 units, you're going to be housed from the start. So you're going to get loom immediately, which means that if you have loom immediately, your villagers are more protected, and it means that you could actually maybe transport something out here. Like there's more shorefish on these outlying islands. You could transport out here and you could, be like fishing the shorefish with your villagers, and they're less likely to get killed because they have loom. So I wanted to bake that in. But you could also use the transport offensively. You could come over here and, land your opponent. So the other thing that I wanted to improve on in Northern Isles was, in Northern Isles, there is an island in the middle of the map that has neutral gold and neutral stone. And that's nice, right? Neutral islands are fun. They provide one more place to talk about. They've, additional opportunities for the players to consider. The problem with it is that if you're ever in the position that you have that middle gold and stone secured, then you've already won the game, right? You don't need that golden stone to stay alive. Your opponent is the one that needs it, because if he's lost control of the water and can't get to that gold or stone, then he could probably use all the resources he could get. So I thought, well, let's kind of make islands going off to the side here. And these islands will contain bonus resources so that if you do get pressured on your island, let's say that you get landed and your gold is denied. Maybe this is a good example. This gold is denied and this gold is denied by ships. Maybe Blue could still have transported out here with some villagers, and he can mine, this gold or this gold with relative impunity. There is a lot more stone on this map. There's actually a lot of stone everywhere, and there are lots of little islands. So the idea was to basically celebrate water. It's going to be a very aggressive map. I don't exactly know how it's going to play out, and I don't know how people are going to try to break it. I think that when you have this much stone available to the players, there's going to be lots of towers and castles, and so ships are not going to be overbearing. On the other hand, though, there's a lot of places where ships can go, and probably the majority of your food economy will be fishing, because there's plenty of fish. There's not a ton of fish, but there's plenty of fish. So those are the main improvements. These islands of course, have the Greek cliffs on them. I'm really excited to see how it plays out, but I don't exactly know. And I should try to organize a show match on these maps. Oh, other thing is you can't dock block the back. Like right here, let's say you could build a dock. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Wait, what? Don, John, Dormatron, Kothon. Oh, for whatever reason, it's going to get called a port, maybe? Well, I don't know. All right, so you could build a dock back here, but as you can see, your opponent can still slip through it. So you'd have to transport over and build a second dock. And, you know, that's a lot of resources to wall off 4 tiles. And, you know, with dock blocking, I know a lot of people could say, oh, well, it's a lot of resources to wall off 3 tiles if you're simply dock blocking. But the thing is you needed that dock anyway. But you don't need this dock anyway because you've already got one. And you're probably not going to be able to sustain fishing ship production from 2 docks. It doesn't really make much sense. You'd rather be spending your resources on getting up to the next stage. So, I mean, maybe this will happen. Somebody will transport over and build another dock. I guess, you know, we'll have to see. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it will happen. So, I'm excited about this map. I think it'll be fun. Could use feedback on it. Tried to really shake things up, you know. And we'll see, because, you know, water is so boring. But maybe we can get the water to interact with towers better. I'd love to see people, like, build towers all along these islands and have, you know, docks in here and be fishing, but have sort of a protective circle of towers around it. And you don't really get that right now. It's because tower range is limited, and the ships just go in and do whatever they want. So we'll see. You know, on the one hand, it's very aggressive in terms of landing capability, but on the other hand, I feel like there's enough stuff going on back here and everywhere else that it's hard to kill your opponent with a landing. I feel like they have options. So, all right, and finally, last but certainly not least, is Nomades. Nomades was made by BP Dredge. It's a friend of mine, fellow clan member. We've got 2 of these ox wagons here. You delete them to spawn 3 villagers. Do not delete them at the same time. Don't delete them at the same time. If you do, you will be defeated. And you start with 3 fishing ships. So otherwise, it's just Nomad. And this Nomad map has Greek theming. It's got the standard Greek beach to it, right? It's nothing too crazy, I don't think. A little lighter on the eye candy, you can tell. That's okay, though. But just lots of resources because it's a Nomad map. A lot of these rocks scattered around. But the goal is to see if we can improve the Nomad experience by allowing you to start with more villagers, but at the same time, you know, give you a mechanism, literally a vehicle, to deliver those villagers exactly where you want them. So you don't have to worry about them running under a town center, because I think these guys have like 1,000 hit points or something. And they're fast too, so they're going to be more likely to get exactly where you want to be to start building your town center. So anyway, that's the Nomad map. We might actually work on this a little bit. You know, it could be cool to have, like, introduce the possibility where you don't know which side, but there's like one side where it's actually going to intersect with the edge of the map, so you can't sail around the edge of the map completely. But we got to talk and see, you know, how much, you know, whether or not that's important. But this is probably the one map that, I know it looks simple, but because Nomad maps are inherently simpler than standard start maps. But on the other hand, you know, with simple comes opportunity. So I think this is a great map. I'm really happy that he did this for me. So thank you, BP, for your help with this one. I don't think we're going to show it on the 8 players, but yeah, this should be good. So that's it, guys. That's all I have for you. I wanted to show you the Return of the Rising Eagle Cup. We've got ourselves a summary spreadsheet here, and I wanted to show you guys and describe the maps and what they're all about, what we're going for on them. So hopefully you found it informative. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing me talk about the design philosophy behind the maps and some of the challenges and struggles and things that we were thinking about. But I think I was going to do another segment. We were going to have a very, very informed and enlightened discussion. I was going to reveal all of my map making secrets, but I can smell Easter dinner cooking downstairs, and it smells absolutely delicious. So I'm going to be heading out now. So not really that long of an episode of Script Chat, but that's all right. It's Easter Sunday. So I know everybody's super busy, and I need to go get some delicious Easter dinner. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and hopefully you're as excited for this tournament as I am. And I'd be really curious to see the guys play. Maybe we'll set up a show match or something. But until later, guys, have a good one, and thank you for being here.